Hi, everybody. I'm Sarabeth Berk, and welcome to Becoming More Than Your Title. This is a series I do to talk to really interesting people who are more than their job titles. Their careers have gone in multiple directions, they've shifted, they've changed. And usually, these people, when they're asked the question, "What do you do?" they say, "I wear a lot of hats. I don't know how to explain it. I just do a lot of things." So, if that sounds like you, that is the topic I've been researching because I'm finding more and more professionals in today's workforce are not just experts or generalists, they're somewhere in between. And we really haven't had great language to describe this category of people. We use terms like I'm a jack of all trades or a multi-talented professional or even a multi-hyphenate. There's so many ways people describe they are many identities. However, in my research, I found that there's another category, a term we haven't been using, which is called being a hybrid professional. Hybrid professionals are unique and different because they actually integrate multiple identities together. So, what that means is if you think of a Venn diagram, at the intersection of two or three different professional identities, a new identity is being created that is a combination of all those other ones. That is a very different way of working and thinking and being in a career. And that's why I do this series, is to learn from people of how they've discovered their hybrids or their thinking and sensing that their hybridity is part of what makes them unique in the workforce. My guest today is Matt Confer, and his background is really steeped in leadership development and innovation strategy. He started in the consulting world with Deloitte, but now he's doing it with Abilitie, which is a really interesting simulation-based leadership and strategy company. And I'm sure he'll tell us more about that. So I'm excited to bring Matthew up to tell us how he's become this hybrid and how he sees hybridity influencing the landscape of hybrid work. We have a lot to unpack in this one, so let's get started. Hi, Matt. How are you doing?
I am doing really well.
It's great to have you. I'm so excited that I get to reciprocate since I was on your podcast.
I'm very much looking forward to being on the other side of the mic.
Awesome. And we just had Simone join us. So hi, Simone. I love starting these shows asking people, what do you do? Because that's such a popular question and it's also really challenging to answer. So I'm curious, what is your response to the what do you do question?
So I guess I would say I run the strategy and sales team at an organization that delivers leadership development programs via experiential learning all around the world.
Wow. And how do people respond when you say that?
They usually say some question of what is experiential learning, and then what does it mean to split your time between sales and strategy? That would probably be the most usual response back.
Fascinating. And so when you say that answer, because it's kind of a job title and then also an explanation, does it feel like it describes who you are, or do you always feel like there's more that you're hiding? How does it feel when you express that?
I think what I want and believe that my role is my role is to find more organizations to bring into the fold that can utilize what we do. And then my role is making our organization better. So that would be the strategy side of our business. And then the sales side is actually finding people and organizations who don't know what we do and making it really clear how we can help them and provide value.
Of course, because that's the sales and strategy combination. That makes sense. Take us back a few years, because you've been in this role a couple years now. And so
Yep.
how did you get here? Who were you prior to this role? I'd love to trace a little bit of your identity journey.
So when I graduated university, I guess when I went to university, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. That went away really fast. Then I got into banking and finance, did 4 internships in what you would kind of call the financial realm during my time at university. Then I graduated during the great financial crisis. So a very bad time to be moving into a banking role, which allowed me to find my way to consulting. So you referenced it in the intro there. I spent about the first 7 or 8 years of my career at Deloitte Consulting in an internal finance kind of project management type of role with them. And it was a wonderful place to start my career. Hundreds of thousands of people, work for Deloitte. You learn a lot. You work with really interesting clients. And that actually brought me to Austin, Texas, which is where I am now. And Deloitte brought me to my role after Deloitte, which was at a slightly smaller consulting firm. That brought me to a financial technology company. And then, as you mentioned, 3 years ago, I found my way to Abilitie.
Oh my gosh. So when I listen to people and I'm sort of observing and understanding their professional identity, I'm hearing there was the former lawyer side of you, then this financial interest, maybe a financial analyst. I'm not sure what to call that. Then you were in fintech. Now you're doing strategy and innovation and leadership. So what are the core professional identities you would say are your strongest and are your greatest areas of expertise today?
A lot of people ask me how I found my way to a leadership development company when very little in my background is actually human resources or leadership or training. What I always point to is one of the last projects that I did when I was at Deloitte is I helped to restructure our onboarding training for new campus hires. And I don't think I realized it at the time, but it was the most enjoyable thing that I had ever done while I spent time in consulting. And I got the opportunity to facilitate that training, to help design the curriculum. And I almost believe that it left a little kernel in the back of my head about this is something that I should potentially consider in the future. And I actually got my job at Abilitie via LinkedIn. I was connected with somebody who posted about an opening. I interacted with that individual, which led me to a conversation with the CEO of Abilitie, which led me to a conversation with the vast majority of the team at Abilitie. And 2 weeks later, I was here and haven't looked back since. So I think it was that kernel of that time at Deloitte that has now really led me to find, I think, the place that I belong.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Those little signals along the way that we didn't know we were looking for that kind of find us and then resonate. And so when you kind of take this self-reflective moment to unpack who you really are and what you really do, are there any other words that would come up? Because I think I'm hearing you imply things, but I just want to see like, who would you say you really are in your job?
I'm the happiest when we get to add a little bit of shock and awe. We're the many people have been through a corporate training and some of them are better than others, but there is at some level a staleness to corporate training. And our belief is that if you build an immersive, team-based, competitive, time-constrained environment, you make corporate training, one, really impactful, but two, really enjoyable. And so when I get to talk to a prospective client or a current client, and they get to tell me about the survey results that said that this was the highest ranking part of their program, that's what gets me really excited. So if we can shock and awe, make people excited about what they get to do when they're doing a corporate training, which sometimes isn't the most exciting thing, I think that's how I define when I'm the happiest in my role.
Okay, so this is interesting. I just want to point out, I was asking you about who you are. You told me about when you're happiest, which when I do research, I actually start with feelings to help people map back up to an identity. So just, I'm going to put this out there as a fun little brainstorm. 2 identities I heard that I would describe you based on your answer. 1 is a designer of delight, and 2 is the master of awe, because that's what you're really doing. What do you think when I say that to you?
I think first off, I'm thinking of expanding my business card and adding both of those titles to it because I definitely could not have come up with that myself, and I'm loving both of those titles. I think the second thing that it made me think is that I am the happiest when I feel like things are a little bit different than the norm. I don't think I would be as happy at this point in my career back at an organization like Deloitte, which I think was the absolute perfect place for me to start my career, given my personality. I think it gave me the foundational skills that I use daily, and it's allowed me to be the professional that I am today. Now that I've morphed into a more seasoned professional, I'm extremely happy to work at a very small company. And what they say about small companies is really true. You really get to impact what happens.
Yeah.
When you're one of 150,000 people around the world, you feel unbelievably proud to be a part of a huge organization, but you can't elicit as much change and as much impact as you can have when your company has less than 20 people and you're really in the meetings that make a difference.
Such a powerful statement. And you have to have all those different experiences to be able to compare and contrast and understand, oh, this is what the impact and the difference looks like in a small versus large. And I work a lot, with people that are just starting their professional paths in college and, just graduating, and they don't understand that yet, right? They don't have that knowledge. So I love that you just stopped and reiterated you started in the right spot, but the journey has led you to a place where you really feel you're in your fullest self, you're having great impact, and you can see those results because you've distinguished, like, this is where I'm the most effective and this is what I love to do, and you're linking and connecting that prior work with the present. So that to me sounds like you are finding the right combination in your career. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's been an interesting ride, to say the least.
And it always is, because you would have started in potentially a law degree and ended up where you are today.
Yeah.
Just that's how it works. And Simone again just texted and said, I love designer of delight and master of awe. So maybe we're on to something. And I do that with people, and listen to what they're really trying to describe about who they are, because it's sort of like this like self-reveal of, yeah, like I have my formal job title, but I have this background set of skills. What does that really make me? Is there another way to frame it that's more accurate or authentic? So I play with that because I've seen many people struggle with being seen and finding where they belong and then putting their best self in the right job. And so it sounds like you just have found that anyway. And I wanted to just state that. I want to jump into the work you do, because you and I share a little bit of synergy where, well, we both have done innovation strategy. That's part of my background. But you're also focused on hybrid work and what leadership is focused on today with this hybrid work world. And so tell me some of the things that are jumping to your attention in that space right now, since we're all living and breathing it and trying to make sense of what is this hybrid thing.
So in a pre-COVID world, about 80% of the work that we did was in the classroom, at a company offsite, and about 20% of the work was virtual. That obviously went to 100% and 0% in about February, March of last year. We feel really lucky that we had a virtual offering, but we've had to refine it. And the thing that I think has shocked us the most is many organizations previously came to us and said, we need leaders or managers that really understand what motivates their people and how can they be more effective coaches and how can they provide feedback in a way that builds the bench of future leaders at our organization, or how can they understand finance and how can they make decisions, and we want to use simulation training to get that. What happened last year is organizations started to come to us and say, we never prepared leaders to manage in a remote first world. Mm-hmm. And we now need to train them in those skills, because just like any other skill, you need an opportunity to practice before you really feel comfortable. So all of a sudden we snapped our fingers and everybody went remote, and not that many organizations had thought critically about training their leaders to manage people remotely, manage the finances remotely, and make decisions remotely. And so that was the thing that shocked me the most. And now as we're entering a more hybrid world, I think organizations are thinking critically about how do we prepare leaders for what is going to be a challenge when some people are back in the office, some people are remote, those days are flexible every week. And I think that's going to be the next challenge that we face.
Oh my gosh. And I love that you are focused on simulations to give people all kinds of, tests and experiments of like, what does this look like, to take it back into real life. That's brilliant. I think when I was on the podcast with you, we broke down this concept, at least this is my belief, that hybrid work is really hybrid workplaces, hybrid jobs, and hybrid workers. So you've definitely nailed simulations in the hybrid workplace. That's the remote versus physical and in person. How are you starting to think, or are you thinking about this notion of a hybrid job, like cybersecurity is becoming the top hybrid job, hybridized roles. And also, I would say teams, right? Because teams are comprised of people that have content expertise. Then there's the generalists, the people that are just good at doing a lot of little things. And then the people that are sort of cross-functional and breaking out of the silos to bring information between departments. Have you thought of like how you train or support companies with those kinds of hybrid areas?
I wish I could say the answer is yes. We really haven't cracked that nut yet, I think. I think what we're trying to focus on is giving people, the best way that we describe it sometimes is a playground and a sandbox to test yourself and try a different approach. I think back to my early years of managing a team, and I think about how scary it was to change my approach or to try a different approach, because you're trying it on real people and you can do real damage to both their career and your career.
Yes.
When you give yourself an environment to practice, you for the first time potentially open up the ability to try a different way of managing. And I think the best answer that I can give to your question is my hope is that simulated training environments give people and give organizations a chance to test different ways of doing things. I don't think we're there yet completely. But what I do believe is that for leaders who get into the simulation, the ones that get the most out of it are the ones that say, this is an opportunity for me to test my comfortable limits a little bit and maybe try to be the leader that I would love to be, but I'm scared to be in the real world because it has real world implications.
Oh, that's fascinating. I just see so much resonance because anytime we are testing things on people, there's so much risk and there could be so much damage. So you're de-risking it and putting it into this lab context or simulation space to let people open up and move beyond whatever constraints and boundaries. So how are you supporting leaders in that? Like, can you tell us one or two techniques that you've seen like help leaders suddenly open up to new possibility?
Yeah. So in one of our simulations, you manage 6 virtual employees, and the
Mm,
employees have different personality profiles. They send you little real-time Slack messages. They send you emails. You watch videos of the characters, and you're
mm,
constantly trying to figure out what motivates these individuals and how should you adjust your management skills based on what motivates the characters in the game.
mm.
What I found is individuals in the simulation, one of the activities is to think about the people on your team, your real team, and start to think about what motivates them. And I think it's a leap that a lot of people don't make. It's just innate to think in a weird way that everybody is motivated in the same reason that you're motivated to come to work. And
Right.
when you really force yourself to say, I have 6 people on my team and I'm going to spend an hour trying to figure out what motivates each of them, it completely adjusts the way that you manage them from that day forward. And we
Mm.
talk a lot in the game about which one of these characters do you want to have a conversation with and how would you structure the conversation? And I think the leaders that get the most out of it are the ones who are thinking, gosh, it's a Wednesday. I'm in a virtual training. Which of my characters in real
Yeah,
life do I need to have the first conversation with
right.
on Monday?
Oh, that's great. So let's extend this a little bit to another part of the workforce that's really kind of getting a lot of flack, which is, retention and engagement and belonging. And how do we keep talent? Because there are just so many, first of all, it's a really competitive talent pool. People are being pulled in different directions, but also that retention angle is money savings and ROI. So how, and this might be more of a hypothetical simulation, how could you see using the tools and simulations you've created to help people understand more about looking at employees as people and valuing them and building understanding there as managers? What do you think about all that?
Yeah, so in one of the simulations, we throw external events at people. Basically,
Mm,
you're doing your job, and then all of a sudden, you get an email about this new thing that your team needs to focus on. It's kind of done to divert your attention away from the job of just getting your job done. And the
okay.
way I think about it in relation to your question is many organizations probably didn't have to think about a remote work plan in the past. But if you want to retain your top talent and attract new top talent for the first time in maybe your career, you need to think about, well, what's our organization's perspective about how many days somebody needs to be in the office? Or are
Mhm.
we going to support people to build build out a home office? How are we going to do different roles and responsibilities in the office? So in our simulation, I could definitely envision an experience in the future where one of your characters potentially resigns on you and joins a new organization because the new organization had a more robust plan about her ability to be remote and take care of her family and also be a committed professional. And so what are we thinking about in terms of the challenges ahead that potentially weren't challenges in the past?
Oh, that's great. I think those are the real curveballs we get thrown, and you've got to be reactive, proactive. It's a little bit of like, what am I doing? I don't know if you saw this recently, but you're reminding me of this article Esther Perel just published. I think it was in Fast Company about the identity economy and how in her work, she, does a lot of psychology with couples counseling, but the lessons she's finding there are translating back to the workplace, especially because of COVID, and that people need to be seen and valued as their whole selves. So these things happening in their personal lives and their social lives matter back to the workplace. And if employers aren't paying attention to that, it's going to have these impacts. I heard one other stat that people are actually declining salary increases of like 30K because they're like, I don't want the raise to come back to work. I want to stay from home. I'll do that if, that's the difference. Are you finding that you're bringing in this literature and this new research into your simulations? Like, how do you incorporate all these moving parts?
Well, so we as an organization, in some ways, have tried to be somewhat agnostic, meaning our hope is we can work with any organization and slot in their preferred approach and use the simulation more as I mentioned before, kind of a sandbox. So if you tell us that your approach to management is these 4 key principles, we can integrate those 4 key principles into the simulation. And so I think that's our goal. We've tried to be industry agnostic, which is hard as an organization. We've tried to say, this is the simulation that we want to use, whether you're a senior manager at a CPG company that sells beverages, but it's also the simulation that we'll use if you're a senior engineer at a global industrial company. Our goal is that these are some principles of effective management and financial acumen that apply no matter the industry that you operate in.
I like that, actually. I think they're just foundational principles of good work and best practice. And I'm hearing almost like a 360, like getting more awareness of how you do what you do, who you are in these moments. And I've seen just, like taking people out of their day-to-day to have this moment to test is really an important strategy, actually, for workers. I have like one more question, which is going back to the hybrid professional identity research. I'm curious, because you've been in the space of hybrid work, but had you ever heard about this notion of being a hybrid professional or having hybrid professional identity?
I think one of the things that I've enjoyed the most about my conversations with you is the answer to that question is really no. I think I believe that hybrid, flexibility, all of these buzzwords are going to be so much more important because companies are demanding a lot of their employees. In turn, I think employees are demanding a lot back. I think of myself, like my wife and I had our first child 7 months ago, and both of our companies were unbelievably supportive of our ability to take time to invest in our family. And I have to say, both of our families were blown away by how supportive our companies were. And to me, I think of it in a way of my company gets a lot out of me. I'm checking email at 8 p.m. sometimes. I'm responding to requests and working over the weekend. But as a result, I feel like the relationship works because they supported me when we had a new addition to our family, and my wife's company supported them. So I think part of what I think about in this new age for workers is there's kind of a reciprocal relationship going back and forth. Companies are asking more. Technology is allowing you to be connected more. But as a result, you're also getting more out of your organization. And potentially that's going to be flexibility in terms of hybrid work, where you work, when you work, and how you work.
And who you are. Back to that premise. No, the flexibility factor is part of how we evolve, right? And things don't stay the same. We know that. And then it's also new things constantly emerge out of the existing old things, and we don't know what they are yet. It's hindsight is always 2020. So I appreciate that. I appreciate that different theoretical lenses are shaping how businesses grow and how we give leadership advice. And so I was so curious to meet you more and to learn more about what you do, and also just understand your own philosophies. And John Rich just joined, so shout out to him. Thanks for listening and watching. Matt, is there anything else you want to leave us with today, either about Abilitie or your own leadership development, or just some aha about your professional identity that's on your mind?
I think when I first took this job, it was really designed as a sales focused role. And what it's turned into is a role that talks more about the strategic direction of our organization, the strategic needs of our clients. It became a podcast role. It became a speaking role. And I think it speaks to the incredible work that you're doing in terms of this role is a lot different than it was originally intended to be 3 years ago. And it will probably be a lot different 2 years from now. And I'm excited to see where that goes.
Yeah, I mean, that's the premise, right? We are more than our job titles, and the jobs itself keep evolving. So the job title, even if you're always director of X or strategy this, it's like, what are you really doing? The job's going to grow as you grow. And you did mention how doing the podcast and doing your TEDx talk were amazing opportunities that helped you stretch and grow. Did you want to say anything else about that?
When I had the opportunity to speak at TED, I thought a lot about the work that we do. And what's fascinated me about our work is how people decide in instances where there's a ton of stress, in instances where they need to get teams aligned on something. People who decide really well put together a framework to how they do it. And I got the chance to speak about that from the stage. And then you mentioned the podcast. That never would have happened if not for COVID. It was something that we were looking for a way to connect with our clients, and people were at home and looking for content. And we had incredible people in our network, and we brought them together. And I'm so happy that that happened, because I think, to your point, my role has changed a lot over time. And I'm excited because there's a little bit of uncertainty with where it's going to go next. And I'm trying to lean into that as much as I can.
I love that. I mean, what great serendipity, also challenging, but you've leaned in. Now I'm thinking, adding on to this title I've been playing with during our conversation, maybe you're the designer of delight and better decision making, because you've got so much around the decision part of what you do.
I'm seriously, I'm expanding the business card as we go. You just keep the titles coming. I'm happy to throw them on.
That's my job.
Yeah.
Matt, I've really, really enjoyed this. I want to let people know where to find you, follow you, tell us where they can pick up a conversation with you.
I've really enjoyed it as well. So social media is at Matthew Confer. I would say LinkedIn and Twitter, I'm the most active on. If you want to check out the podcast, Sarabeth's episode was one of our favorites. And I'm not just saying that because I'm looking at her. So that's called Learn to Lead. And then the TEDx talk is called Before You Decide, 3 Steps to Better Decision Making.
Amazing. Yeah, the TEDx is great. I just watched it. I got so much out of it. You're so clear and succinct. I felt like the takeaways were solid. Definitely follow Matt. And if you want to learn more about hybrid professionals, grab the book, More Than My Title, follow me, or come to my website. I have a lot of resources and tools. And I'm always looking for more LinkedIn Live guests if people want to share their own story of learning about their hybridity or just diving into it like I have with Matt today. This has been a huge pleasure. I really appreciate your time, your insights, and just being so open. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to say goodbye for now.